Welcome, Gunrunner.
Debuting in September 1982, the Tangerine Oric 1 was one of the very first true competitors to the hugely successful ZX Spectrum. It was also launched in France around the same time, and while the Specky started to dominate in its home market, the Oric did the same on the other side of the channel. In many ways, the Oric was responsible for creating the French video game market, in fact, launching famous software houses like Logiciels and Infogrames, the latter of which still exists today, now using the Atari name. But unfortunately, the Oric's success was quite short-lived, and as more powerful home computers started to arrive, it was pushed out. Not even the remodelled Oric Atmos could save it. I don't want to go into the computer's history in too much depth here, because I've already done that in another video as part of my Amazing Facts series, which I'll link in the description. In fact, it was actually my 10 Amazing Oric 1 and Atmos Facts video that inspired me to make this follow-up of sorts, looking at some of its best exclusive games. That video was a surprising success story, especially when you consider how obscure the platform is these days, and its research sent me down so many different rabbit holes that very much gave me the knowledge to put this one together now. In fact, one thing that very much surprised me when I started researching the Oric was how many great homebrew games it has, so much so that I could have simply filled this whole list with modern fan-made titles. I managed to resist that temptation, but still included a couple, as I felt it was wrong not to. Alongside a nice range of both British and French productions from back in the day, of course. Now I've got this intro out the way, it's time to turn our focus to the games themselves as I proudly present 10 amazing Oric 1 and Atmos exclusives.
Like humans, computers have memories. Unlike humans, their memories shrink when they work. Functions like colour, sound, and movement use up large amounts of memory, leaving little for you to use. The new Oric Atmos, however, takes these functions in its stride, leaving lots of memory, so you can expand into advanced programming and sophisticated games. The new Oric Atmos 48K, the large memory that stays large.
Given the Oric 1 found enormous success in France during the early part of its life, I think it's only right to start with a French game, in the form of 3D Fungus, from the legendary Gallic software house Logiciels. A cross between a racing game and a 3D flight simulator, this is not just a great game, but also a good demonstration of what the hardware can do in the right hands. You see your plane from a third-person perspective and must fly it through the flags, a bit like a slalom in skiing, whilst avoiding all the hazards. These obstacles include such things as huge rocks, cacti and even charging rhinoceros. Your plane can take just 5 hits before it crashes, so you need to be careful not to take too much damage. On the track you will also see crystals that can be collected for bonus points and holes in the ground, which you can fly into to take a shortcut. This sees you flying through a fungus-filled grotto, hence the title of the game, which does save you a lot of time, but also comes with an added risk. The fungi itself is lethal and will kill you on contact, but that's not the only thing to watch out for down below, as there are also spanners that when collected will repair any damage that you may have taken. The graphics here are excellent, the frame rate is fast and it controls really well, but it's a shame that the sound effects are so meagre. There's nothing else quite like 3D Fungus on the Oric, a real must-have game. This game is totally unique in Ocean's library for a couple of reasons. Firstly because it's exclusive to the Oric, but also because it combines a text adventure with arcade style minigames. You actually start this game off by defining a number of characteristics, another very novel feature, such as how many lives you want, what speed you want to play at, and how hard you want it to be. Then you go straight into the meat of the game, the text adventure itself. This is pretty standard stuff, with words on the screen describing your surroundings and simple text-based commands being used to navigate the world around you. However, at key moments in the story, the action switches to something, well, more action-packed. These little diversions include such things as swimming through shark-infested waters, negotiating a maze as quickly as possible, and climbing dangerous mountains to retrieve valuable birds' eggs. All of these little games are played using predefined keys and a simple set of instructions, which are displayed on the screen before you start, so you aren't just going in blind. The quality of these minigames varies greatly, while some of them are quite fun, others are rock hard, and more than a little unfair at times too. But I have to take my hat off to the overall concept of Island of Death. Not only was it very original for the time, but it actually comes together pretty well for the most part too. Now, I don't usually include homebrew games in these amazing exclusives lists, but there are a couple for the Oric that are so amazing I just can't leave them out. And here is the first of them, Space 1999. A wonderful game created by a collaboration of the Oric scene's most talented homebrewers, Kima, Twilight and Debug. Based on the cult Jerry Anderson TV series from the 70s, this is a 3D isometric arcade adventure very much in the style of early ZX Spectrum games by Ultimate Play the Game. Like the TV show, you're stranded on Moonbase Alpha, which has lost power after a huge nuclear explosion and is now hurtling towards a star. Most of the crew have been evacuated to the lower levels where the radiation isn't as strong, but as Commander John Koenig, you're tasked with making the required repairs to the space station to restore power and get it back into Earth's orbit before time runs out. So like other games of this type, you'll need to collect objects, interact with your environment, such as using computer terminals, and interact with other characters. The map for the game is absolutely huge, so it's a good job they included a copy of it with the download, because you're going to need it. The graphics here are superb, and the music and sound effects are great too. Space 1999 really is a labour of love, and one of the very best Oric games you'll play. Okay, so I was in two minds whether to include this one, because as you'll soon discover, it's far from original, but it does add a unique slant to an existing concept, and the game is just so damn cool that I felt it would be wrong to leave it out. I'm sure that pretty much everyone watching this is well aware of the classic Parker Brothers Atari 2600 game Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and you might also be aware that the game served as the inspiration for Jeff Minter's insane Attack of the Mutant Camels. Well, as it turns out, it also inspired a much more obscure and lesser known game in Softtek's Ice Giant for the Oric 1 and Atmos. The gameplay here is pretty much identical. Fly across the screen trying to stop the enemies from reaching your base. But the way the game is presented is very different indeed. You see, the AT-AT walkers from the 2600 game have been replaced by the titular Ice Giants, who clamber across the screen, swords in hand, shooting energy bolts out of their eyes. Instead of the snow speeder, we now have a man riding some sort of flying craft with a weapon in his hand, which reminded me a bit of both He-Man and Joust. This weapon shoots lasers at the ice giants and, just like the Empire Strikes Back, they change colour as you shoot them. Take them all out and it's more of the same, only harder. Ice Giant is a great looking version of an already classic game. Not to be confused with the much later game by the Bitmap brothers, IJK Software's Xenon 1 is an old school arcade shoot 'em up that owes a lot to the classic Century arcade game Phoenix, but also has elements of some other famous shooters of the time too. On the first couple of levels, you're simply taking out the flying enemies whilst avoiding their fire. Like Phoenix, some of these will split into smaller enemies when you shoot them. Then you have to negotiate an asteroid field, no shooting here, just getting out the way of the flaming rocks. From here we move on to the mothership phase, and I say phase because this is also made up of 2 levels as opposed to the straight out battle in Phoenix. In the first section you're out of your ship and are using your laser gun to blast away the paratrooping enemies. If these soldiers manage to land, they move into a tunnel underneath you and try to stab you from below. This reminded me a lot of the long forgotten Sega arcade game Commando. Get past this stage and you jump back into your ship to take out the boss. This bit plays just like Phoenix as you try to get through the defences and hit the mothership's weak spot. Xenon 1 has really colourful graphics that look fantastic, excellent sound effects, and with 10 difficulty levels on offer, some very compulsive gameplay too. Old school arcade gamers will absolutely love this one. There's no doubt that Doggy is the most famous Oric exclusive, and the main reason for that is that it was programmed by none other than Eric Chahi, who later went on to create Another World and Flashback. In the game you play as the titular canine who has got lost on a visit to the park, and now he needs to find his way home and get his dinner. This is a side-scrolling platformer-like game that is actually very reminiscent of the modern endless runner genre you find in so many mobile games these days. You simply guide Doggy as he runs from left to right along a straight path, trying to avoid the many hazards in your way. You can move up and down as well as jump, and you'll need to time the latter perfectly to avoid some of the larger obstacles. There are huge holes, logs, other dogs who want to fight, bushes and even bear traps that will stop you in your tracks. You also need to watch Doggy's energy levels too, because all this running and jumping makes him very tired. So along the way you will need to collect the bones to keep this topped up. Although Doggy has fantastic visuals in general, I really need to mention the amazing animation, which really became a trademark of Eric's games. There is also music that plays throughout the game, unusual on the Oric, and it sounds great. With charming and unique titles like this, it's very easy to see why Mr. Chahi went on to bigger and better things. question I have about this game is how it's pronounced. Is it Pasta Blaster, so it rhymes, or Pasta Blaster, so it makes sense? I guess we'll never know, but what we do know is that it's a very cool and rather humorous Oric exclusive. The game reminded me a little bit of the classic Williams arcade game Robotron 2084, but with more than enough original elements of its own. You take control of the titular Pasta Blaster and are trying to protect the tins of ravioli in a pantry from the dreaded pasta pinchers. There are 6 of these tins and the enemies are constantly trying to steal them. If they manage to grab them all, then it's game over, so you need to blast them all into oblivion before they can do so. But be aware, because your gun only has limited energy, so you need to pick up the red crystals to keep this topped up and make sure you don't shoot them. There are also yellow crystals too that can be grabbed for bonus points. As well as the pasta pinchers, there are also pack persons who want to eat you instead. The colourful graphics and noisy sounds suit the game perfectly, and the responsive controls really help you keep up with the non-stop action. Pasta Blaster might not be the most technically impressive game on the Oric, but it's a fun arcade style shooter with bags of both originality and personality that will keep you high score chasing for some time to come. Like Xenon 1, which I've already looked at, this is another game by John S. Sinclair, who was a bit of a whiz kid on the Oric. However, this one is a lot more original in concept and widely regarded as one of the system's finest games. You start the game by selecting from one of 4 different missions before being greeted by the rather ominous statement, "Prepare to meet thy doom." On the first stage, you are trying to make it to the top of a tower, whilst rocks are being thrown at you from above. You need to avoid these at all costs and try to grab the golden bird that will fly you up to the next platform. On the second stage, you see Princess Roz screaming from the turrets of a huge castle, and what look like pterodactyls trying to poop on your head. You need to avoid their droppings and lower the drawbridge to make it to the next part. Once in the castle, you're trying to avoid Medusa-like creatures, killing them by deflecting their death rays, and deactivating the force fields. Then you move onto another section of the building with more hazards to negotiate. The next stage, rather weirdly, is a defender-like shoot 'em up where you just have to survive. Then you move to the top of the castle to try and rescue the princess in some sort of strange cross between Breakout and Donkey Kong. It all comes together really well, and it's easy to see why Zorkan's Revenge is so highly regarded by the Oric community. I didn't really want to include another homebrew game in this list, but there was no way I could leave out Blake 7. Not just because it's a brilliant game, but also because of the trivia associated with it. You see, although it's never been confirmed, it's long been thought that the Oric name was taken from the original Blake 7 TV series and its fictional artificial intelligence system, which was named Oric. That piece of lore no doubt inspired Kima to create this homebrew, and like another TV series inspired game in Space 1999, which I featured earlier in this list, Blake 7 also pushes the Oric hardware in ways we've never previously seen, taking the form of a LucasArts style point and click adventure. In Blake 7 you play the role of Rog Blake, a rather content citizen living in one of the many domed cities now found on planet Earth, controlled by the Terran Federation government. You start by learning that something isn't quite as it should be. You're having nightmares and constantly worrying about your family, who are supposedly living in a faraway colony, whilst you work here for 10 years in exchange. As you start to explore, you also start to learn the truth, and the story unfolds. Puzzle solving is the order of the day here, and Blake 7 has great visuals, even better audio, and some really deep gameplay that is quite unlike any other Oric game out there. Consider this a must play for the Vintage Home Micro. I had to save this one for the end, not just because Defence Force is probably the Oric's highest regarded game, well, commercial one anyway, but also because one of the Oric's biggest online communities is named after the product, which was published by Tansoft, Oric's own internal software label. The game is often compared to the classic Williams Electronics coin-op Defender, and it's easy to see why, as there are certainly lots of similarities. This is also a horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up where you fly in both directions trying to protect the helpless humans on the planet's surface below. It also has a wide range of different enemies to destroy and is split into waves. You have to save the humans in the same way if they are captured, and you also have a scanner to see where everyone is. So I'm sure that by this point you're wondering if there are actually any differences between Defender and Defence Force at all. Well, there actually are, but they are very subtle indeed. Firstly, in this game your ship fires automatically when you move, and the fire button is reserved for activating your shield, which protects you from enemy attacks for a short time. There are also no smart bombs or hyperspace here, and there's also a wider range of enemy types. As far as arcade quality games on the Oric go, this is as close as it gets to pulling it off. A really superb game on every level. And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing Oric 1 and Atmos exclusives. Can you think of any other one-off titles that only ever came out for this now rather obscure home computer, or do you think some of these games were unworthy of inclusion? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comment section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Grady Haynes, Mitchell Valentino, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Sonic Mania 999, Paul Daniel, Andrew McKay, Retro Resolution, Matt Standish, James Taylor, Trogdor the Burninator, Mins, 8-Bit Guy, Luke MC, Ben P. Stein, David Kitsune, Alan J. Dodds, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to hosted content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.